Name is Carly Richmond. I'm a senior developer advocate working at Elastic. Before that, I worked at Morgan Stanley for 10 years, doing all sorts of weird and wonderful jobs. Most notably as a front-end engineer. I am a speaker, I am a blogger, I hang around all sorts of various social forums on the interwebs. So I'm on X, if you're still there, feel free to give me a follow. I'm on Mastodon. I haven't quite moved to Blue Sky yet. If anyone's on there, let me know what you think of it. I have my own personal blog and I hang about on LinkedIn a lot as well. So if you want to connect, say hi, DM afterwards. I'm always happy to chat further. But we are here today to talk about speaking. And when you saw the title of a Dreamcatcher, you probably thought, what has that got to do with public speaking? So I got my first Dreamcatcher as a preteen, probably about 10 or 11. It was one of the first kind of purchases I made for my room, kind of going into being more of an adolescent. And the idea of a Dreamcatcher is quite simply that it's meant to have the good dreams flow through the gaps in the net, and then all the kind of bad negative energy kind of gets stuck on the actual kind of web strings. And then when the morning sun comes up, that they are basically destroyed by the morning sun. That's kind of the idea of it. So think of me as basically that lovely midday sun coming through to try and get rid of as many of the things that are stopping you doing public speaking, either within your own company, within particular external opportunities, meetups, conferences, even sessions like this. We're going to try and tackle as many of the issues that are basically stopping you from putting your kind of foot forward, saying, yes, I'm going to do that. I'm going to talk about X. So to do that, let's do a little Slido quiz first. So what I want you all to do is if you take a snap of that QR code, or if you are a QR code phobic person, which is absolutely fine, if you go to slido.com, the code is this one here, 2274181. And we're going to answer some questions together to try and find out what the aversions are that people have. But first, I want to gauge your confidence levels to see how happy you are at the moment with speaking. So if I hypothetically asked you right now, that's you, Anthony, isn't it? To present a 1-minute talk, I'll give you a couple of minutes to prepare. I want to know how likely you are to volunteer. I'm kind of glad that I've got a likely and an absolutely. We've not got anyone saying no. Very unlikely. Okay. So we're very evenly split, which is kind of what I expected. So that is absolutely a-okay. So now what we need to do is we need to dive into a bit of the why on this. So this is a word cloud. So you should see on your device that it's popped up with a text entry box. And I want you to rhyme in everything that kind of stops you speaking. So it can be related to simple things like the format, in person, it can be about nerves, it can be about finding the right content, the right forum, it can even be about kind of peripheral things like microphones and stuff, anything at all that you're kind of like, I'm not so sure about this, and you can actually put in as many of these as you like. So it's not just you commit to one theme, you can add in tons. So we've got the pressure of call to papers, the fear of looking stupid, +1 for that one. Nerves, shaking voices, cool. So I'm going to put speed down because that was a big one for me a while ago. Cool. Saying the wrong things. Okay, this is good. So this looks to be all around preparation. So this is good. This is useful. So we talked about speed. Too fast. Silence. Oh, that's fun. That's a fun one. We might want to dig into what we mean by silence there. Okay, I can see someone still typing. Questions. I have a whole section on Q&A. So that's really good. And we're going to talk about call for papers to try and debunk it, what kind of things you should put in there, things like that. We've got about stuff around preparation, which can help with speed, saying the wrong things. But to be perfectly honest, because we're a small group today, what we can do is come off mute, or I'll keep an eye in the chat as well. If anything comes up as I go along, feel free to call out and say, if you're comfortable, any particular issue that relates to that, or something that I say that might resonate or might be something that you already find to be a problem. If you're willing to do that, if you want to use the meeting chat instead, that's totally fine. And I'll keep an eye on that too. So whatever everyone's comfortable with for raising concerns. Cool. Right. So Alex is here too. Cool. So fear is essentially very much heavy in a lot of the things we talked about in the word cloud, like fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of looking stupid. And glossophobia actually kind of comes from a very normal place. It comes from where all our fear comes from. So I was actually listening to, this is a tangent, but people, you'll understand why it connects in the end. I was listening to Mystery Hour on LBC last week. Does anyone listen to that at all? No. So it's fine. So basically it's an hour where people phone in with a question that they want to know the answer to, and then someone else will phone in with the answer. And last week someone asked, well, why are kids afraid of the dark, particularly around school age? And a child psychotherapist calls in. And she basically talks about the three factors, but the biggest factor is actually evolution. Because if you think about fear, fear is your body's natural trained response to a potentially dangerous situation. So in the dark, you might kind of see things that are not quite there. Your eyesight isn't that great. And obviously, from an evolutionary standpoint, the people that went out in the dark at 2 o'clock in the morning to find food were potentially going to be eaten by a predator. And if you think about it, the modern day equivalent, at least according to Deborah Frances White, is that fear of public speaking is exactly in that same guidance, because you have a bunch of people sitting in front of you that you potentially don't know, that you're seeking the approval from, that you're afraid that you're going to look stupid in front of, and you're effectively the gazelle sitting in front of a pack of hungry lions wondering if they're going to eat you. And she says this in her TEDx talk from a few years ago, which I strongly recommend watching because it's funny, but it also busts this idea that you have to be a charismatic speaker, that you have to have charisma in order to be a good speaker. Quite frankly, it all comes down, in my opinion, to preparedness, to support, and also just someone sometimes tapping you on the shoulder and saying, you should do this. This would be pretty good for you. Everyone with me so far? Wonderful. So, does anyone want to raise a hand and say that they've maybe had a bad experience with public speaking in the past, and that might be a reason why? I definitely have. I have vivid memories of doing it at school, and it was horrible. I'm not sure I don't know, we've got potentially people that weren't educated in the Scottish school system like I was, but certainly a lot of my bad experiences come from there, but also come from experiences in work where I have came away feeling like I look stupid, that I've said the wrong thing. And they become effectively the emotional baggage that stops us from being brave and going off and doing what we need to do. So I think that's one of the first reasons for me personally why I didn't want to do speaking for so long, was that I remembered all the bad experiences I had, but now I remember all the good ones I have as well, and they outweigh the bad ones because I've been doing a lot of it. The other thing is, we don't really get any education or really a lot of an opportunity to practice too much, either in education or within our jobs. Does anyone think they get any education or support in their roles at the moment for public speaking? No. That's why you've came to this talk at lunchtime today, right? And I'm in the same situation. I've certainly seen, particularly I came up from the state education system, and we don't do auditory at all. We don't do this notion of how to speak, what body language should be like. And that's something that sadly is a gap that's filling basically a whole generation of professionals that have not been taught how to speak, because we just assume that it's something you'll grin and bear and get over and done with. I know it sounds really cheesy and corny to say, but it's all about having courage. It's all about just saying, it's something that I want to learn to get good at and enjoy doing, rather than something I'm going to grit my teeth and bear and just do. Does that make sense? Because if you keep saying, oh, I really don't want to do this, and you put it off, or it's something you're not doing on a regular basis, you're most likely going to continue to have those really bad feelings whenever you go to do it. So it's all about taking a negative and turning it into a positive. It's kind of like the way where you're trying to get your children to eat their vegetables. You don't just give them broccoli once and say, when they say they don't like it, they never have it again. You keep trying, you keep going. And it's the exact same thing with any skill that you want to practice and do, including public speaking. And there's all sorts of places that we can do that. So we are here as part of the Aspiring Speakers and Inspiring Women Speakers groups coming together. They're hosting regular events, including lightning talks, including speaker clinics. These are forums where you can get an opportunity to practice in a space that is safe, that's comfortable, and you're speaking for a few minutes. And if you start with a small talk that you've prepared, then that means that over time you'll be happily kind of preparing bigger and bigger talks. So one of my experiences was I started off with a lightning talk at the LJC, London Java Community, and I absolutely, I thought it went okay, but I did trial runs with other people, and then I started off with that 5-minute talk, and then I started doing different topics, and then I started doing longer and longer talks. And through that, I actually managed to effectively build up a bit more of a kind of joy of doing it. And in fact, the speakers clinic, which Anthony has kindly put in the chat as well, that we're running on the 5th of March, is an opportunity to bring any kind of questions you have, any particular feedback that you want to get on maybe a proposed talk or an abstract or something like that. And I'll plug that again at the end with details again, how you can sign up. So you can sign up now or you can sign up at the end, no pressure. There are other formal places. So for example, Toastmasters, I have, as a disclaimer, never set foot at a Toastmasters session. But certainly it was something that my prior employer did run as part of a group within the organization, and it was open to anyone. So you can go onto Toastmasters site and look for either groups that are outside your organization, or you might have seen emails floating about inside your workplace where people can go. It's more of a formal program than, say, the lightning talks or some of the other things that have been run in the other groups. So the question is, do you prefer formality or informality? But it's still a valid route to go. And then the other way is not just the LGC, but any meetups. So for example, I run the Elastic London meetup. I know other people that are running meetups all over London, all over the UK. And organisers always want people to come and speak, even if it's a lightning talk, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes in a small space. So if you're a member of a group or you attend regularly at the moment, float the idea with the organiser and say, would you like me to come and speak at the next one or maybe the one after that? And then you can bring your idea to the speaker clinic and we can help you out. See, they're all connecting together. So it's all about finding smaller forums first and then scaling and engaging as we go. Is everyone with me so far? Bad. Okay, I've got to stop doing thumbs up because clearly it's having some fun with my camera. Okie dokie. Now, the other thing we need to think about is mentors. So this was actually pivotal for me personally, because even before I did my first lightning talk with the LJC, I did a trial run with a mentor who was someone that I reached out to that I knew was a prominent speaker. And I said, look, I want to get into conference speaking, kind of for me, for my own development. I have no idea where to start. Mentors are people that we use for any form of skill we want to pick up, be it for particular technical experience, for particular soft skills within our industry, and we're happy reaching out for mentorship for those kinds of things related to our roles. But for some reason, we never do it for speaking, and I'm still struggling to figure out why. So if there's someone in particular that you've seen before, someone in your organization, you think, you know what, they do killer slides, they do killer presentations, they're really good at this particular thing that I'm not comfortable with. It might be worth reaching out and asking, look, can I pick your brain? Can I get some tips on how you do that? And then try and incorporate that into your own style. It's okay to take feedback from others. It's okay to try things out. And then at the same time, if they do something and then you try it and you're like, oh, I'm not sure that feels authentic to me. Maybe they are big on the hand gestures like I am, but you're probably not the person that waves as much as I do, as we can tell from my Zoom fireworks continually going off. And that's okay, but the forums to try it are things like lightning talks and utilizing what they say. Is this for me to mentor, Shalini, that you're talking about?
So I filled up a form up there on the website when I got to know about the aspiring women speakers, but I did not get any response. It's been more than 10 days or so. I thought the system might take time to match me with one kind of thing.
Yeah,
So I'm
sure.
just curious if I should, fill in the request again, or I can get you the mentor. That's great. So anything for that matter.
Tell you what, see if you DM me at the, or maybe connect with me on LinkedIn or something afterwards. Let me try and follow up in Slack with Helen and see if I can find out what's going on.
Thank you so much. That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Cool. Right. So, should have put my clicker on today, I didn't. I think one of the big things that I struggled with as well, which I don't know if anyone does as well, is it's not seeing someone that's maybe resonates with you as a person on either conference lineups or on stages can make it feel like it's not the place for you and it's not a place that you should be for whatever reason. So, as I kind of mentioned before, I come from a background in investment banking. So, a lot of the early forums that I was exposed to were town halls within the organization where you had people like executives speaking who were predominantly white men in blue suits. And, I don't know if you've noticed, but that's not me for several reasons. One, I don't tend to have that very formal speaking style, I would say. I tend to make a lot of self-deprecating jokes, which don't really go down as well in those forums. I tend to laugh a lot and I tend to wave my hands around continually, which is not really considered probably executive style. And even then, I never wore a blue suit. I actually wore sundresses a lot when I worked in banking. And even today, I'm wearing like a wacky teacup t-shirt, and it's not really me. But even if we think about the tech industry, which I'm in now being a member of Elastic, quite often we see white guys in jeans and t-shirts. And you know what? That's not me either. For various reasons, for style, for, demographic, all sorts of things. It's very difficult to be the thing you can't see. So I want to show you some fab people that I've seen either on the lineup for prominent conferences that I kind of keep an eye on, or even some that I've been fortunate enough to see in person at particular conferences that are just fantastic, that are from all sorts of different backgrounds. And they all rock at public speaking. And you know what? You can too. There's no reason I couldn't add any of your photos to this collage here. You all belong up here at the end of the day. It's about just saying I am able to do this, and being able to see someone. So I hope everyone sees someone that maybe resonates with who they are. That be fair to say? Yes. Cool. And if you don't, please let me know. I would love to show you some other prominent speakers if there's anything in particular, like, well, I have this particular style or I belong to this particular demographic, and I'm more than happy to try and point in the right direction. One of the things that I struggled with a lot, purple hair. Alex, I've not had the nerve to dye my hair purple yet. We'll give it time. So I definitely identify with that as well. So I don't know how many people have had particular points in their career where they think that maybe for a developer conference or a tech conference, they're not knowledgeable enough, they're not technical enough, they don't know enough of the subject matter. I am here today to tell you that is absolute rubbish. This is one of the things that really annoys me in tech, because I've had periods of gaps where I haven't written code for 2 years, through various different reasons, such as roles. It can be for caring responsibilities. It can be for parental leave. There's a ton of different reasons why you're not writing code every day. And even then, as an engineer, you probably have stints where you're maybe working on tasks that are not fully code dependent, maybe infrastructure related tasks, so you can feel rusty. Actually, for me, I found engaging in public speaking was my way to get back into being technical, because I had to research these topics in order to talk about them. They helped me find the things that I was interested in. And also they helped me actually find out about all the different topics that other people think about, because I started attending conferences. And I'm going to tell you right now, not every tech talk at a conference is endless streams of code on every slide. And to be perfectly honest, in my opinion, neither should it be. I think we might be all falling asleep if I was showing code snippet after code snippet after code snippet for an hour. It can get too much. So you tend to see with a lot of speakers that they might have code snippets and they might be doing live coding, but they'll also be taking a break, going between slides or going between pictures or alternating with other things. So a good tech talk isn't just about diving into detail, it's also about knowing when to come up for air and go back down again. The other thing that I didn't realize is that there's tracks within conferences that are dedicated to the softer skills. So things like engineering management, things like agility topics, things like, build and deployment practices that are not about showing tons of code. So to be technical is to have knowledge of your domain, which you all have because you have experience and you have roles and you're very accomplished individuals. And it's about showcasing that stuff in your talk. It's not about saying that you need to know the ins and outs of every single tiny little property in a particular technology. It's about just saying, you know what, this is the story. These are the things I'm talking about today. This is the scope of what I know about, and this is the scope of what I don't. If you want to start off with things that you might consider to be a bit easier to talk about. So I, for example, started at Lean Agile conferences because at that point I was doing a lot of Scrum Mastery. And then when I went back to being an engineer again, I started being able to kind of do more in terms of technical talks and more technical content. So it's all about mirroring what your skill set is at that particular point in time. Does that make sense? Wonder. Okay. It's not all about the code. Pretty sure if I put this up, people would just kind of get scared and run away. The other thing is it can be really, sometimes you can think that you missed your boat. It's something that you think, oh, I've not got time to do this. I've got my massive to-do list at work. It's just a case of finding small ways to try and incorporate it in. So is it maybe the way that you start is maybe your company have lightning talks. Maybe they have, like when I worked in some teams, they used to have brown bag lunches where someone would come along and talk about something they've been working on. Maybe you're doing sprint reviews and there's a demo portion that someone needs to volunteer to present. There's ways to incorporate it within the particular role that you're doing, even if you think it's too late or I've not really got the time to be submitting to tons of meetups and tons of conferences. Just make sure it's something that's manageable with your time and then find those small snippets where you can work on it. So I have loads of ways to find forums. If anyone has any others, please feel free to throw them in the chat or feel free to come off mute and mention them as well. But word of mouth is a big one for me. So I'm part of a developer advocacy team at Elastic. Going to conferences is part of what we do. So we often talk about conferences that we've found to be pretty good or ones where we've had a good experience or where we've seen like really cool people talking or have talked about something interesting. So hearing from colleagues and peers is one way to find out about good places. And I say forums at the top on purpose because it's not just about conferences. It can be meetups, it can be sessions in work, like we talked about Toastmasters, we talked about kind of little brown bag lunch sessions. There's also Slack channels, so aspiring women speakers and aspiring speakers both have events and CFP channels. You can look at those to see, is there any meetups that are in my area that align with my interest? And some other groups have that as well, like I know Women Who Code London have one as well. Meetup.com, Eventbrite does have some, like obviously it has the aspiring speakers groups, but meetup.com has a lot more in terms of not just technical, but also all sorts of various different groups that want to meet up. So have a look through there and search and see if there's a group that you'd like to go along and speak at. You can frantically Google and see what you can find, which sometimes I do have to resort to doing, to be honest. You can use CFP portals. So a big one is Sessionize, and you can actually do cool things like search for events and upcoming call for papers in there. There is the Tech Daily CFP email blast and Find Your Next Conference, which are sites which just have listings of conferences. And then I have to give credit to Aurelie Vash at the bottom, who has a GitHub maintained conference list where it's all about partially around agendas. So you can use it to dive into agendas of prior years of conferences to see if maybe what you want to submit might be a good fit for this year. But you can also see upcoming deadlines as well, which is super handy. Has anyone found any other resources that they use? No? Cool. That's A-okay. There's probably more that I've missed, so I can throw all of these in a chat later and we can talk about it.
Sorry, I couldn't find my mouse to hit the unmute
No worries. Have you got one, Anthony?
So I think I really like the local communities, for instance, like everyone here, I assume that most people here know the London Java community, but just like the London Java community, there is like the Manchester Java community, etc. And they are always like opening opportunities when you get to the point that you're done with virtual events and you really want to like make part of like those smaller communities often have great events that feel like a stepping stone into the bigger conferences for sure.
That's a good point, actually, because I found that I also had to start small. Otherwise, I think if I'd hopped just immediately doing my first conference, I would have probably had a bit more of a panic attack. Meanwhile, because I'd done London Java Community, I then went to doing an in-person meetup. So I did React Advanced, and then I went on to conferences. So, but even then, I still love doing meetups because you tend to get, it tends to be a bit cozier. You tend to get a lot of questions, and it tends to be a bit of a safe space. Plus, there's always pizza, some beer, which is always nice too. So yeah, I definitely agree with that, Anthony. Going for meetups first is definitely a good one. Cool. Right. So some people had mentioned about CFPs and review processes. Is that something we're still feeling unsure about? Yes. Okay. So I have my tips. Obviously, I've got Alex is on here. I know he's a very accomplished speaker as well. So if Alex has any other feedback, I'm sure she'll chime in and she'll keep me right. So CFP, you either hear it called call for proposals or call for papers, but generally it is a conference, sometimes a meetup. It's rarer. They tend to be more of contact the organizer and they'll try and slot you in, a bit more informal. But this is a formal process normally where basically you submit what you want to talk about and they will have a committee who will look at all this, in most cases, the majority of the submissions. They'll normally rate and compare, and then that will be used to make a final decision on what the agenda is going to be for the conference. It can be split. So, for example, a larger conference like DevOps UK, well, that has multiple tracks, might split the committee by track. Others might have a small committee that cover everything. It really depends on how the conference runs and operates. But the general idea is you'll submit a talk, details, and eventually they might kind of, they'll review it and then they'll figure out what their conference agenda is based on the submissions they've got. So obviously you need a title for your talk, which is very, very obvious. My general advice is I've sometimes went down the route of having things that sound a bit flashy and exciting, but they don't necessarily say exactly what's on the tin when it comes to the talk. So try and make sure that you've got titles that are clear, that are not too wordy, and explain what the talk is about. You then have what's called either an abstract, sometimes it's called a description, but it's basically a brief summary of what your talk is. So potentially a few lines long, explaining maybe what the problem is that you're trying to cover and how you solved it, if it's a problem solution style talk. Basically, what are you talking about? A talk outline is more detailed, so that would cover like maybe a rough order of the key kind of points you're going to cover. I always include target audience as well, because it shows that you've actually, one, it's helpful for if you're building a talk to think about who you're actually targeting so that it actually keeps you right when you come to write the talk. But also it's a good way for you to show that you've actually, thought about who the target audience is for that particular conference, and it helps the organizers figure out if it's the right fit. Format is normally mandatory. It might be drop-down fields, but it's basically what's the level of knowledge assumed? Is it a beginner or an advanced topic? Quite often, if it's a multi-track conference, it'll be tracks. So is it, testing? Is it build and deploy? Is it something like that? And you might also have the length or the style. So sometimes it might be 20 or 30 minutes. It might be 50 minutes. Maybe it's an Ignite talk, which is 5 minutes, which can auto rotate. So what format you're submitting for. And then optionally, you can include slides if you have them. If you've done the talk before, that's great. Feel free to add those in if you have them. If not, it's not a big deal. And then a sample video, ideally, yes. If you have something, even if it's not the same talk that you're wanting to submit, showing off your style, even if it's a 5-minute lightning talk at aspiring speakers, is a good way to show off what you can do. And in fact, my first ever conference submissions, that's exactly what I included. I included my little LJC lightning talk video. I spoke for 5 minutes and that showed off what I could do. So even the shortest talk can still be used in a CFP. You all with me so far? Cool.
Sorry, can I ask a question? Which
Sure.
is, I think that I have a lot of anxiety of like getting rejected. And I've been to talks about getting rejected from this call for papers, you know. And there's this impression that you have to be a well-established like speaker to even get a chance. So can you maybe talk a little bit about how was your humble beginnings? How was your first experiences getting into one of those big conferences?
It was kind of like shock and panic. It's really strange because it was something I'd worked on for so long. It's something I knew I really wanted to do. And then my first acceptance came and I'm like, oh, why did I do this again? So I definitely was exceptionally nervous, and I think I would have been more nervous had it not been for that my first ever kind of acceptances to big conferences were at the time when a lot of the conferences were running online. So I certainly celebrated the win and kind of chatted with my husband and was like, look, I got accepted. This is pretty cool? And he's like, yeah, this is amazing. But I was still terrified. And I think for me, that just meant that I channeled all my energy into preparing and making sure that I was happy with what I was doing. So actually, I did work with people like Helen and Barry and things to form a plan of how I was going to prepare for that particular talk and Mag as well. And I actually set myself mini deadlines of how to prepare. So this is when I'm going to have my first lot of slides done. This, I'm going to do a recording and send it to a friend for feedback. And I kind of built it up that way. In terms of rejection is something I still struggle with because it can feel quite personal. Because you're like, oh, I really wanted to go to that one. In fact, I've had myself and one other colleague have had a string of rejections recently from several conferences. It's not something that goes away, it's something that's still disappointing, but it doesn't take away the shine from the accept that comes in. My general advice is if you're not sure why it's been rejected, and they've not come back saying things like, we had record numbers of submissions this year, which I've had a few times, and it generally works out that they have two different talks and they just have to pick one because they cover the same topic. It's not always just about what you submitted, it's about the entire conference. So sometimes thinking about it from that perspective, sometimes asking for feedback to try and make it better is the way to channel that energy of rejection. But even sadly, sometimes you don't hear back, and those I think can be even worse. But you just have to shake it off and embrace the fact that there is an acceptance there, and then celebrate that win when you finally get it. Does that make sense? Yes, thank you. Well, and I know Alex has put some stuff in, so I'd encourage you to read her comments. So she gives great advice about looking at the previous years to see the tracks and the topics before you submit. And the formats and things as well. So I definitely am going to +1 what Alex said there. That's really good. So next, I'm going to walk you through 3 to show you where these things should fit. Because that's the thing, you get these forms and you're like, well, Carly told me I needed to give these things, but it's not in there. So this is DevOps UK. This is one of the submissions I made earlier in the year. So you see I've got my title. The description is basically the abstract, right? So it's that brief description. Commonly, that description will go on a conference website to show what the talk is about. So try and keep it succinct and to the point. You'll see I've got the track, the session type, and the audience level on here. I've got notes. So this is where you put things like the outline, the target audience, but also see if you're flexible on any of these things and you're not sure. Put it in as a note for the conference panel and they'll have a look because they read the notes. So for example, if I said that if I was happy with doing this as a shorter talk, so rather than be conference, I wanted it to be, I could do it as a tools in action, which is 30 minutes, or I could even do it as an ignite, then I can put that as a note in the bottom for the committee. And then that means they've got a bit of knowledge on how flexible I would be for tweaking the format. DevOps is the only one I've found that ever has this notion of an elevator pitch, but it's basically the way I sum it in my head is, why should you give this talk and why should people attend it? So it's just a very small blurb, exactly what an elevator pitch is, this idea of, selling your talk and selling why you should give it. Slides link, and then also video, and make sure when you submit a slides link that the URL is publicly accessible. Otherwise, you might have people coming back asking, can you give me access to your slides so I can have a look? So that's always a good thing that people forget. Now, this is another one. This is Sessionize. And this is for Dev Barcelona, which actually is open, by the way, if anyone is looking for a conference to submit to. So things in here that are a bit different that you need to look out for. This conference has a maximum number of submissions. Not every conference does, some do, some don't. Just make sure to obviously respect that. So with Sessionize, it obviously won't allow you to submit anymore because it actually counts your submissions against your profile. But if someone puts it for Google Forms, for example, it doesn't have that same policing. So just be mindful that you don't do that and don't submit more than once. Very obvious thing to say, but you should be submitting once and once only. Again, title, the abstract, the format, the track, the level. This one has language because obviously they have English and talks in Spanish as well. Tags, slides, there's further details down like a notes section where you can add in those additional details we talked about. And then you'll see it's got a blurb on the side as well as on the site. So they'll normally say things like what the tracks are. They might say things about they might have guides for new speakers and maybe a link to details of support they give. So some conferences, for example, for new speakers, can pair you up with a mentor, for example, for that conference. They can offer additional help and guidance and support. And sometimes they have guides that maybe give a bit more detail on what they're looking for in a proposal submission. So look out for those things in the blurbs, be it on whichever forum. And then the last one I have is an example of using a Google Forms, which is particularly common. So this is one for JS Nation, which is a Git Nation conference. You'll see here that they have an in-person and remote and a remote option. So sometimes you might have people ask you to submit preferences of whether you want to attend in person or remote. So make sure you think about those and think about your timetable. So if it's too tight for in person, but you might be able to say remote, it's okay to say that that's your preference. It's better to kind of commit to the remote option than going for in person and then having to cancel or change later. You see that it's got a ton of potential topics that they talk about. It's not just JavaScript frameworks and that's it. So there's things on soft skills, UI, performance, all sorts of things are just part of that ecosystem of being a JavaScript developer. So it comes down to that idea we talked about before. It's not just about showing endless lines of code. You'll see they've got 2 talk lengths, so either 20 minutes or a lightning in 5 to 7. And then one of the things that they've given, which is nice, which comes back to your question, Anthony, they've actually got a notification of approval window. So they'll tell you when to expect to be responded by. Not all conferences do that, but it's definitely worth, if they do, making a note of that so you know when to expect that good or bad news. Does that make sense? Cool. And then again, the details are the same. What is the format? Contact information. You need to actually be able to contact you. Your title, your abstract, those additional details we talked about. Potentially slides and links could go in here too. And the categories. And then you get to the end and you have that panic moment of, well, hold on a minute, should I really be submitting to this? Is this actually the right thing? Do you know what you do? You take Helen Scott's advice. You just hit the submit button and run away. And I still do that to this day. I will go and make myself a cup of tea after I've submitted a CFP just to kind of calm down a bit because it can be a bit scary. And then, as Anthony, you were asking about, one of 3 options. You're either going to get a notification of an accept, which I got one today, and it would still do the victory dance. Woohoo! Sometimes you're going to get a no, and then it's fine to go and ask for feedback. And sometimes you are going to get nothing, and it's okay. Particularly for bigger conferences, if they have a high volume of submissions, they might not get back to everybody. And it's still okay to email out and ask for feedback if you so choose. Right.
Sorry,
Yeah.
can I just ask a question? So I have a 4th case over here. So I recently submitted a topic for discussion and I got a yes initially and they were very excited to have me. I submitted all the entire idea, all the bullet points, etc. We set up the call and then I got a response saying that the person who's supposed to contact me, they were not well and they will talk to me later. And then I followed up and then the discussion never happened.
I'm sorry.
Um, no, that's fine. I'm not hugely disappointed by that because like I got the light from some other place, and I'm setting up myself to speak at the different place. But the thing is, I don't understand what should I do in this particular case, because I tried twice and then I stopped because clearly I'm not getting the response. While I was going to appreciate a professional response to say that, hey, by the way, now we got somebody else filled in, or somebody else is talking about the same topic, anything but a professional response, a courtesy to say that we're not going ahead with this proposal,
Mhm.
uh, while it was accepted at the first instance. So I don't know how do you deal with that. It's very awkward, kind of rejection. It's a form of rejection, but very different.
Yeah. So the closest I've had to that before was I had a conference that they reached out to me on LinkedIn and asked me to submit. I submitted. And then they got back to me saying that they liked my talk, but they wanted to put it in a different track. And I said, that's fine. And then they came back they came back again and said, oh, actually, we want to do we're really low on talks for this other track. And I see you've done this talk before. Would you be willing to do it? And I wasn't willing to do it because it's a talk that I haven't done for several years. It doesn't really fit with what I do now. And to be perfectly honest, I'd retired it and didn't really want to do it again. Um, so I was in a similar situation. I actually sought out advice from some lovely friends in Glasgow, and they went, "Oh no, just say no. Um, it's up to you. I don't think there's a right way to deal with this. If you've been emailing the person directly and they're not responding, but you have a contact email for the conference organizers, you might want to contact them instead, and you might get a quicker response because maybe someone else is picking up their slack because they're out sick. Um, that might be something worth considering. Does anyone else have any other advice?
I saw them posting on the LinkedIn, they were in the contact and all that. So I know that, you know, it's just kind of ghosting someone, which is fine. But I just expected a professional response, and I wasn't going to mind that. But okay, I was just wondering, if you
Yeah.
have such experience. But okay, cool. Never mind.
Yeah, the closest I have is that, and it kind of knocked me because I thought that was like a big shot because they'd asked me about keynotes and stuff, and I thought, oh, that would be really cool. But to be perfectly honest, it's their loss. You're clearly a fab, accomplished speaker. You've been accepted somewhere else. Like it is their loss.
Look, one of my ex-colleagues, he used to be in my team. He did a lot of speeches. Oh, he applied massively to all of them. And most of that, he didn't get any answer. That my, but eventually he keep applying until he get an answer.
That's
Yeah,
the perseverance we need.
sure. No, thank you so much for the advice. Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. So people had talked about in that word cloud, just making sure we cover this section. I had talked about things like speed, about kind of stuttering words around kind of not feeling like an idiot, not feeling stupid, these kinds of things. It comes down to preparedness. Now, this doesn't matter whether I'm talking about a big conference talk where you have, a big stage and you've got your slides or whichever content you're going to show. I also prepare for smaller meetings as well, where I'll actually do trial runs by myself. I know this might sound strange. I am not the only person to do this. So, one of the teams I worked in, I was lucky enough to sit next to the director of the team. And whenever he was doing kind of particular sessions to management where he kind of needed to know what he was going to say, you would see him kind of with his headphones wandering about the floor talking to himself. That was him practicing what he was going to say. And I do the same thing. It doesn't matter. Even when I was a front end engineer and I had to demo off new features, I would write down a rough idea of what I wanted to cover. And then while I was doing the demo, I would tick them off in my head. So, irrespective of the size, it's not down to being charismatic and saying, oh, I'm never going to get super nervous. It's about embracing the fact that you will be nervous and about preparing for that. So, Some of the things that we need to think about is the format and how the format can support us with our nerves. So again, Deborah Francis White, the overuse of PowerPoint is the equivalent of going look a zebra. I have made the mistake countless times, particularly when I worked in banking, of using slides like a crutch. And for a reason, there's a reason why all the slides you've seen today don't tend to have a lot of bullet points, not super heavy on text and content, because otherwise I will be so worried about skipping through each of the points that they have that I am more likely to stutter, I'm more likely to speed up, I'm less comfortable. So think carefully about having a minimal approach, in my opinion. It doesn't work for everybody. And you can have bullet points and presenter notes instead, which you can either have on cards, you can have them kind of next to your laptop, or you can make sure that when you're setting up your laptop for presenting at a conference or a meetup, that you've still got your notes on your screen, your main screen, and then the big screen will just have your slides. And that's A-okay. And then to prepare as well, in addition to thinking about content, think about actually doing the talking to yourself bit. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I did it twice this morning for this session. I actually did it. I stood in this office here, chatting away to myself. My neighbors probably thought I was absolutely nuts, but it works because it gets the flow in your head. It helps you remember what the transitions are between the slides. If you're really brave, you can try and record it and watch yourself back. How does that feel for people? Yeah, we're all shaking our heads because it's absolutely horrid. I have done it once. And now I will only listen back if I have to. Because sometimes I have to review things to make sure I've not said something silly. Which, you know what, I haven't, so it's fine. You say something sometimes you might expect, but generally, if you know your content and you're prepared, you're not going to be saying something stupid. But what you can also do if you're worried about things like stuttering, about filler words, about ums, about space and silence and whether it feels weird, record yourself and watch it back. And then as a fun exercise, get a friend to watch it back and compare notes, because I bet you money, as exactly the same thing happened to me for preparing for my first conference, as Anthony was asking about before. You will have the situation where you pick up all the minor things that most people don't notice. You'll think a couple of uses of a filler word is the end of the world and a big deal. They probably won't have noticed. And then use that to kind of show yourself that you know what you're doing. Does anyone want to try recording? Not convinced you yet? That's fine. It took me a while as well. No worries at all. So someone did ask about Q&A. If I don't cover what your particular concerns are with this bit, just tell me, please. But Q&A is tricky because we feel we can't prepare for it. In some regards you can, and in some regards you can't. So you can try and anticipate the questions that you're going to get ahead of time. Are you going to get all of them? No. You can also, in some conferences, quite often they'll ask for, and I even had this last week at a conference, they'll ask for placeholder questions for you to be asked within the gap while people are thinking. And those you can then pick what questions you want to be asked. And sometimes that can lead people down particular avenues. And those you can prepare for. Honestly, the best advice I have for Q&As is if you really don't want to do it, in the majority of conferences, it's optional. It's worth checking with the organisers if it's not clear whether they have Q&A baked into the time or whether it falls on afterwards. But there's no reason that if you're really super uncomfortable that you can't say, actually, I don't really want to do Q&A. I'd rather people follow up with me afterwards. Is that all right? You as the speaker generally have the control on that. And you can either, if it's part of the scheduled slot, like it is with a lot of conferences, then you just run to time and no one asks you questions. Or if it is, you can maybe finish a bit early and just say, actually, come and speak to me afterwards. I'll be out in the hallway track. The other thing you can do, if you do accept Q&A and something comes up that you don't know, is just say, I don't know. It's okay. We can't be experts in every little thing. And quite often people consider what we've said in a very different perspective from what we did. So if a question comes up and you say you're not sure, don't try and waffle through. Don't try and kind of, say, kind of come across and say like that you know the answer when you don't. It just looks inauthentic. Just say, I don't know. Or I'm not sure, I need to think about it. Or it's not something I know about, but if you want to come chat afterwards, I can take the question away and find out for you. Or even a good one is, if it's a conference and you're there for the rest of the time, come and speak to me afterwards and we can have a Google around and see if we can figure it out together. There's options to running Q&A in a way to overcome that uncertainty, but I don't know is just one of the best answers, and it's an okay answer to have. So I have one more question. But first, I want to make sure that we have covered all of these things. So we talked about nerves. Nerves is pretty much a normal part of it. Preparation will help you to be more controlled and less nervous. You can also try calming techniques. So before I do a talk, I always have a cup of green tea. You might have wondered why I've been sitting with a cup of tea the whole time. So if you have particular rituals that you want to do, things that help you calm down beforehand, like a cup of tea, think about that. Or even think about the reward afterwards. Maybe you want to reward yourself with a chocolate or something. Shaking voice and silence, it comes down to practice. Practicing the silence portions, knowing your content, and just keep going. Just don't think about if you made a mistake, just keep going. Because if you start to shake, eventually your voice will even out. Being in the spotlight can be difficult. I find walking around the stage and looking at one or two people in the audience and focusing my attention certainly helps with that one. Fear of looking stupid, you own this, it's your confidence. The only person that knows what the talk is you, because you wrote it. You're not going to look stupid, absolutely not. If you fact-checked and you prepared, you'll be fine. We've talked about speed. The other advice I have on speed is I always imagine that I'm reading a story to my 4-year-old, because you naturally, when you're reading to a child, slow down. So that's another thing, but that and practicing and knowing your content will help. And remembering to breathe. I know that sounds like a really silly thing to say, but remembering to breathe. Saying the wrong things, then just say, oh, I didn't mean to say that. What I meant to say is this. Correction, once you realise, it's fine. If it's something that's not quite right, then I would correct. If it's something that is just, you feel like you're saying the word so much, just take a deep breath and keep going. We've talked about questions, and we've talked about call to paper, and particularly on the pressure side, hit the submit button, run away. So we had a bit of a split view the last time, didn't we? So if I ask you that question again, how likely would you be to volunteer? Am I going to get everyone putting their hands up in the air? My work is done. No, I've only had one person submit.
And that was me, so it's cheating. Totally cheating.
That's fine. Hopefully, at the very least, I've helped you all to reconsider, so I can live with that. We're all good. Okay, so has anyone got anything else that they think I've not covered? We've got 1 minute.
So I think the only fear I get is just that I don't know enough, or I'm not an expert, and there can be people in the room who are better than me. So again, it's like, feeling stupid kind of fear, being in the room sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a bit of that, and I've had a bit of it. I think what I want to talk about is obvious, or not interesting, or that someone can cover it better. What I tend to find is that, see, if you're adding in your own personal experience, it's not something that can be questioned. So even if you're presenting to, the original creator of React about stuff in React, if it's more about how you've been using it, then it's not incorrect. You might get, oh, well, why did you do it instead of this? And say, that's the way we did it. but it's okay to do that. It's still okay to also be nervous, but quite often you won't necessarily know that that person's in the audience until you started talking or after. So you're kind of in a situation where you need to keep going anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great advice. Adding your personal experience is a good way to overcome that fear. Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, any last fears that we want to tackle? No. Cool. So I will ping these in the chat afterwards. So it's all the resources I've talked about today through the slides. I also have a blog on in-person versus online. So if you start doing lightning talks, it can be quite a jump to do your first in-person. So I can share that as well. And the charisma versus stage fright video is actually quite funny. So I definitely recommend that because it's very relatable. We have the speaker clinic coming up, so feel free to register. No worries, Vicky. Thank you for coming along. We'll see you soon. So feel free to sign up, bring along talk ideas, any other questions, any other concerns, slides, there to help with anything that you can think of. We've got the lightning talks. We're hoping to plan another one, Anthony, soon, so look out for the invite for those. And with that, thank you very much, everybody. Feel free to connect afterwards if there's anything.
Thank you, Carly. That was an amazing presentation. Just to reinforce what Carly has said, lots of you folks are known faces and known speakers in both communities. Do come into the speaker clinic, bring up your slides or your questions. If you know somebody that is looking for, please make them tag it along, and then we'll use the lightning talks to basically practice whatever parts of your presentations you want to improve. So this is the idea: create this framework for like everyone to practice in a safe environment, right?
Yes.
Just to clarify, it's only for women or also
No.
for men?
Both communities. So I don't know, Sebastian, are you part of the aspiring speakers group? I'll send you the link. But the aspiring speakers is open for everyone. The aspiring women speakers is just for women. Right.
But we still invite people along. Like if there's an event that you see that you're interested in, you're always welcome to come along. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. So just sending the link to the aspiring speakers group. And there will be a recording, probably is going to be on YouTube somewhere when we speak with RecWorks folks.
Yep.
But this is where you can join the community. And thank you very much again, Carly, for everything.
Anytime.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Carly. Thanks,
Thank you,
Anthony.
Carly.
Have a good day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.